All right, your next witness,
Plaintiff calls Christian Carino, Your Honor.
Christian Carino.
And as with a number of the other depositions, this one will start with questioning by Ms. Heard's counsel, and at some point switch over to questioning by counsel for Mr. Depp.
All right, and how do you spell the last name just for me, just in case?
C-A-R-I-N-O.
Thank you.
An address for the record, and you may use your business address if you feel more comfortable.
Sure. Christian Carino, and the work address is 2000 Avenue of the Stars in Century City.
And that is in California?
Correct.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a talent agent.
And could you give me just a very brief description of your educational background and work experience?
Sure. I have a BA from the University of Massachusetts, and my work background is I've been at CAA for approximately 16 years, and before that I had a 12-year run with 2 different advertising agencies in New York.
And who were those advertising agencies in New York?
Ogilvy and Mather and McCann Erickson.
Right. Now, you indicated that you were a talent agent. Can you please describe what that means?
I represent multiple clients and brands in transactions in the entertainment space.
And when you say in the entertainment space, what are you including?
Just the different genres of entertainment, everything from motion picture to television to books to licensing to modeling, all the different areas that the agency operates in.
As a talent agent representing multiple clients, what types of services do you perform for them, and what is the objective?
Okay. Yep. I conduct business transactions on behalf of clients and brands in the entertainment space.
And what does that mean?
It means I organize, pitch, transact in contractual agreements between talent and studios, talent and brands, entertainment platforms and individuals, brands and individuals.
Do you represent any actors?
I do work with every different group of talent within the agency, and for each person it's different, the business that I personally oversee for them. So in some cases I am negotiating contractual agreements for a music artist to go to Las Vegas. In some cases, I'm transacting an agreement for an artist to have a relationship with a brand. In some cases, it's an artist with a platform like Netflix. It spans the general platform capabilities that the agency has overall.
Is one of the objectives of your representation to build the careers of the individuals you represent?
Yes.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Waldman in which you expressed any thoughts or opinions on how you believed any litigation was having an effect on Mr. Depp's reputation or career?
Yes.
How many times?
One that I can recall.
And when was that?
I have no idea. Years ago.
If you expressed to Mr. Waldman that the sooner the litigation was over, the better for Mr. Depp, what were you thinking when you said that? Why did you think that?
I think anytime somebody is in litigation publicly, it is at a minimum a distraction to that person's career. And in a lot of cases, it negatively impacts that person because there's attention drawn to them that it is outside of what people want to know about that person.
And what do you mean by it distracts from the career?
I mean that with somebody who is well known, people don't want to hear they're in a lawsuit with anybody about anything.
Why not?
Because that's just not what they want to know or hear news about people.
And why do you believe that?
Based on my experience in this world for the past 16 years.
And when you say it negatively impacts, what do you mean by that?
People don't want to hear that the people that they look up to are in litigation.
Do you also believe that that impacts career decisions by producers, directors, companies, with brands, things of that nature?
Yes.
And in what way?
Because the general public doesn't want to hear that people that they look up to are in litigation. And when the more oxygen it takes up in the overall news or coverage of an individual, and the less focused it is on that person's career, the less interested studios, brands, the general public becomes in that person.
And therefore less opportunities?
Yes.
When you expressed to Adam Waldman that your opinion that the sooner the litigation is over for Mr. Depp, the better, what did Mr. Waldman say?
To be honest, I don't recall exactly what he said, but something like, we're gonna get this over with as fast as we can.
Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as Carino exhibit number, we'll keep it labeled 4. Do you believe that the Mandel lawsuit posed a distraction to Mr. Depp's career?
I don't know.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Carino Deposition Exhibit number 5. And as you can see here, it's an article June 21st, 2017, the Hollywood Gossip. Do you recall that coming up during that time frame, that issue?
No.
Have you read or heard of the Rolling Stones?
Yes.
Have you read or heard of GQ?
Yes.
Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as Carino Deposition Exhibit Number 2, and it's Rolling Stone publication on June 21, 2018. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you ever read this article?
Parts of it.
Are you aware of whether this article in the Rolling Stone, June 2018, that's reflected in Carino Exhibit Number 2, impacted in a negative way Mr. Depp's reputation or career?
Elaine, I don't think it's possible to ask anybody that question without having done research among the people who read a specific article. If you're asking my opinion about whether an article like this or this particular article, in my opinion, would have a positive or negative effect on somebody's, career, I could potentially answer that. But as to definitively whether an article has or has not had an impact on somebody's career, nobody can answer that question without research. Specifically.
Mr. Carino, I think we were just going to start looking at the Carino Exhibit Number 3. This is an article that was published in November of 2018. Do you recall reading this at some point?
What publication is that?
This is GQ.
I probably read part of it, but I don't remember.
You had any direct contact with Ed White or his company?
Yes.
What is the nature of your contact with Ed White and his company?
Payment on deals where Johnny was owed money. Bill collecting.
When you say bill collecting, was it collecting on your behalf, or was it trying to collect from studios or companies?
The latter.
And so what would your involvement be in those circumstances?
Ed, on occasion, reached out to me to ask about the timing of a payment that was owed to Johnny.
All right. And were you able to answer those questions?
I think in all cases, I just referred him to somebody who worked for me to find out what the payment schedule was.
Other than these occasions where Ed White would reach out to you to ask when timing of payment, did you have any other connection or communication with Ed White or his company in connection with Johnny Depp?
No.
Were you familiar with Jake Bloom?
Yes.
Do you know whether Mr. Bloom ever represented Mr. Depp?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of the nature of that representation?
He was his lawyer.
Did you ever talk to Jake Bloom?
Yes.
On how many occasions did you speak with Jake Bloom relating to Mr. Depp?
I have no idea.
Was it pretty frequently?
What does that mean?
Well, was it more than 10?
Are you asking me if I had approximately 10 conversations with Jake over the duration of our relationship?
Yes. I actually asked if you had more than 10. I wasn't asking you if it was exactly 10.
Okay. I mean, I'm guessing that it was probably less than 10 in total.
Was Mr. Bloom still representing Mr. Depp when you started representing Mr. Depp?
I believe so, but I'm not sure.
And when did you start representing Mr. Depp?
I believe it was in late 2016.
Mr. Carino, are you looking at something to be able to refresh your recollection?
I am.
What do you have in front of you?
A note that I made to myself of the date of when Johnny was a client, and I think I wrote down October 2016.
Do you have a recollection of the context of your discussions with Mr. Bloom?
Yes. My recollection of the conversations I had with Jake were in regard to getting Johnny and Jake to meet and work out whatever the issues were around their disagreement.
So you were trying to broker, if you will, a discussion between them to try to resolve their issues?
Correct.
Were you successful in that?
I don't remember whether they ever got together and met about it, to be honest.
Now I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition, Carino deposition exhibit number 7. And this is a lawsuit that was filed on October 17, 2017. Were you aware of this litigation being filed by Mr. Depp on his behalf against Bloom, Hergott, Demer, etc.?
Yes.
And were you involved in any way in this litigation?
No.
Do you know one way or the other whether the filing of and the ongoing litigation associated with this lawsuit had any negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career?
I said no, Elaine.
Do you recall whether there was any publicity surrounding this litigation that's reflected in the complaint that's Carino number 7?
Are you asking me if I'm aware if the Jake Bloom litigation was made public?
Yes.
Yes.
And in addition to being made public, do you recall whether there was publicity surrounding the Jake Bloom litigation?
Yes.
And do you recall whether there was publicity surrounding the Mandel litigation?
Yes.
Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 10. And in this particular one, we have, this is the article that was written in the Sun Times that was the beginning, if you will, of the UK lawsuit. Do you have a recollection of seeing that?
No.
Did you ever read it?
I don't know. I'd have to, I don't know. I'm sure I read at least part of it if it's the original document that caused the Sun legal issues.
Now, the date on this one is April 27, 2018. Do you see that on there?
Yep.
Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you what has been marked as deposition, Carino deposition exhibit number 11. and it's dated June 13, 2018. It's hard to see that little stamp there, but it was filed on June 13, 2018. And it's Mr. Depp filing the News Group Newspapers Limited, who owns The Sun, and then Dan Wooten. Were you aware that Mr. Depp brought this lawsuit in the UK against The Sun and Mr. Wooten?
Yeah.
Mr. Carino, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked now as Carino Exhibit number 12. This is published in the Washington Post on December 18, 2018. Were you aware of this article?
Yes.
Op-ed.
Yes.
Mr. Carino, when I asked you whether you were aware one way or the other, whether this lawsuit that's reflected in exhibit number 11 had a negative impact on Mr. Depp's reputation and career, you answered no. What did you mean by that?
I meant that there isn't a way for any individual to know whether the filing of a document had an impact on somebody's career, positive or negative, without specific research conducted in exactly that case.
The same as in the facts that because you haven't researched it, you don't know whether it impacted Mr. Depp's reputation or career, correct?
I believe I stated that unless someone had done research specifically about the filing of this document and its impact one way or the other, it's impossible to answer the question.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Carino number 14. This is the lawsuit that Mr. Depp filed against Ms. Heard. Do you believe that the filing of this lawsuit reflected in Carino Deposition Exhibit number 14 and the attendant publicity has had a negative impact on the reputation and career of Mr. Depp?
No.
And why not?
Because I've stated previously, it's not about the filing of a lawsuit, it's about the coverage. I mean, you're asking me what my opinion is of what Johnny's reputation is today. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
My opinion of what Johnny's reputation today is one of the finest actors of his generation.
In your opinion, has Mr. Depp's reputation changed at any point from October 2016 to the present?
If you're asking me if what I defined as his reputation has changed in terms of his being viewed as one of the best actors of his generation, I would say no.
So just so I'm clear that I understand your answer, in your opinion, Mr. Depp's reputation is that he is one of the finest actors of his generation, and that has been his reputation since you started representing him in October 2016. It still is today, and it hasn't changed during that time frame. Is that correct?
The view on his acting ability has not changed.
Well, I'm taking your definition of reputation. You said what they are known for. So I'm taking that specific definition, and I'm asking, is there anything other than that Mr. Depp is one of the finest actors of his generation that he is known for that has changed between October 2016 and the present?
The only way I can answer that is as it relates to his professional capabilities. That has not changed.
Is there something that has changed that doesn't relate to his professional capabilities?
I don't know how to answer that, Elaine.
Using your definition of reputation, which is what a person is known for, is there any aspect of what Mr. Depp is known for that has changed between October 2016 and the present?
I've stated what I think his reputation is, and I've stated that, in my opinion, his professional reputation as it relates to the quality of his acting abilities has remained unchanged.
Do you make any distinction between personal and professional reputation?
Yes.
And what is that distinction?
The difference between what somebody does on screen and off screen.
What is your opinion of what Mr. Depp was known for off screen when you started representing him in October 2016?
I think what he was known for off screen was a shroud of mystery of who he was, because he was not visible to the public.
And that was back in October 2016?
I don't have a specific date for that.
But when you started representing him, that was your sense?
Yes.
Okay. Did that change over time?
Yes.
And in what way did it change?
It changed with the exposure of that came with the lawsuits.
And the lawsuits that we're talking about are the ones that we've already taken a look at: Exhibit 4, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 15? No, I mean 14?
I mean, I'm not talking about any one or two specifically, in general.
Do you believe that Mr. Depp is still a shroud of mystery, not visible to the public?
No,
And when did that change?
I don't know exactly when.
Would you say it was cumulative over the period of time as a result of all of the litigation and the publicity ensuing?
Probably. Agree with that?
Is there any one specific litigation that you believe most significantly impacted on Mr. Depp's personal reputation no longer being a shroud of mystery and not visible to the public?
My opinion is that Amber's accusations would have had the most dramatic impact on his off-screen reputation. I'm not talking about any one specific accusation.
When you say Amber's accusations, what do you mean by that?
I mean, the things that she's accused Johnny of doing, both that have been made public.
Now, those accusations were made public in the divorce back in 2016, correct?
I don't know exactly how or when they were made public.
Given that you believe Amber's accusations would have had the most dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation, would Amber have been filing the divorce action and obtaining a domestic violence restraining order have had a dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation?
I think the only way I can answer that is by saying I don't think filing for divorce would have any impact whatsoever. And I'm actually not familiar with the lawsuit to get the restraining order, so I don't know exactly what's in there. But if that was based on claims of or accusations of abuse, then that, in my opinion, would have a negative impact on Johnny's off-screen reputation.
Mr. Carino, we were talking about Amber's accusations and your view that those would have the most dramatic impact on Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation. And you were talking about her accusations of domestic abuse and violence, correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that the Dan Wooten article published in The Sun included specific accusations by Amber Heard of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp?
The Sun case, is that what you're asking about?
Yes. Well,
Yes.
First the article itself that was in the paper, the why is J.K. Rowling genuinely happy about employing Mr. Depp, the wife beater?
Yes.
Okay. And you're aware that the litigation, the lawsuit, including the particulars of the claim brought by Mr. Depp, included the accusations by Amber Heard of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
Given that the Mandel lawsuit included accusations by Amber Heard of domestic violence by Mr. Depp against her, are you able to say how much of Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the Mandel lawsuit?
No.
Now, you were aware that the op-ed by Dan Wooten in The Sun included accusations by Amber of domestic violence against Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware, one way or the other, how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the complaint that was filed in this case that contained Amber Heard's accusations of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp?
No.
Are you aware of how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted as a result of the op-ed in the Washington Post from Amber Heard?
No.
Are you aware of how much Mr. Depp's off-screen reputation was impacted by the accusations included in the Waldman tweet on May 2020 of the op-ed?
No.
Are you aware of any role or opportunity that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the op-ed by Dan Wooten and Son?
No.
Are you aware of any role or, and when I'm saying opportunity, any kind of business opportunity that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the particulars of claim that Mr. Depp filed?
No.
Are you aware of any role or business opportunities that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the op-ed by Amber Heard in the Washington Post?
Objection.
Are you aware of any roles or business opportunities that Mr. Depp lost as a result of the Waldman tweet from May 2020 relating to Amber's op-ed?
No.
Is there any other role or business opportunity that Mr. Depp has lost since you started representing him in October 2016? And I'm saying,
I would say his, I would say yes.
what?
The Pirates, the next Pirates movie.
Do you remember which one that was?
6, 7, I'm not sure what the number is.
It's 6. I think Pirate 6 is the one that's yet to come out here. And why, what is your understanding of why Mr. Depp lost Pirate 6?
My opinion is that it was related to the accusations that Amber has made.
And what is your opinion based on?
Excuse me?
What is your opinion based on?
Conversations with colleagues and studio execs.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Conversations with studios and other executives, both internal and external.
When you say related to the accusations that were made by Amber Heard against Mr. Depp, are you talking about accusations of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp?
Yes.
How many conversations have you had with studio and other executives?
I have no idea.
More than 5, more than 10?
I don't know about more than 10, probably between 5 and 10.
Who do you recall speaking with at studios or other executives?
Jerry Bruckheimer, probably mostly Jerry, and then colleagues at CAA.
When did you first have any conversations with Jerry Bruckheimer about Pirate 6 and Mr. Depp?
I have no idea.
Do you recall whether it was in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019?
I don't.
When did you have any conversations with colleagues at CAA?
It would have been whenever the decisions were being made about how to cast that movie. I don't honestly, I don't know what year that was.
Do you recall who you spoke with at CAA?
I spoke with Jack Wiggum. I spoke with Brian Lord.
What do you recall Jerry Bruckheimer telling you?
I don't recall the specific conversations, but the nature of it was that the studio was having difficulty employing him.
And did Mr. Bruckheimer tell you why the studio was having difficulty employing Mr. Depp?
No, not specifically, but it was understood.
Did you ask?
I didn't need to.
Why did you think you didn't need to?
Because everyone was aware of what was garnering the attention of the studios and determining whether or not he could be employed.
When you say everyone was aware, how do you know that?
I don't know. I just knew.
Can you tell me who everyone is? Can you tell me who anyone is?
The people who would have been involved in making that decision.
Well, if I'm understanding you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only person at Disney that you spoke with about pirates and employing Mr. Depp was Jerry Bruckheimer, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you spoke between 5 and 10 times with Mr. Bruckheimer, and he did not say in any of those conversations, the reason we're not employing Mr. Depp is because of Amber Heard's accusations of domestic violence and abuse by Mr. Depp, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Carino, when we went off for the break, we were talking about your discussions with Jerry Bruckheimer and other executives at CAA respecting Mr. Depp not being employed further at Disney and likely not pirates. And I think a question came up right before the break. And so I just want to make sure that I have clear. Did you talk with anyone other than Jerry Bruckheimer at Disney about Mr. Depp not being employed again at Disney or Pirates?
No.
Okay. And was I correct that you, in a certain understanding, you had somewhere between 5 and 10 conversations with Mr. Bruckheimer relating to this topic?
Probably less than that. I talk to Jerry regularly, but probably not that many on this topic.
Okay. And was there anyone else at Disney that you spoke with at any point about Johnny Depp being considered for pirates or not being employable by Disney?
No.
Okay. And is that true to the present?
Yes.
Okay. And the other discussions that you had, those were all with executives at CAA?
Yes.
And that was Brian Lord and Jack Whittle, correct?
Yes.
Anyone else?
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay. You had indicated that you believe that everyone was aware that the impact of Amber's allegations were at the heart of this. I just want to make sure that we're clear, since we were just talking about this before the break. Jerry Bruckheimer did not say specifically what it was that caused Disney to decide not to continue with Johnny Depp and Pirates 6 or in other matters, correct?
Correct.
Well, and I'm trying to reach that it was understood. I'm trying to discover any facts that would have led you to believe it was understood. And if I'm understanding, to use the same word, Mr. Bruckheimer didn't tell you that, correct?
Again, it was understood. So I don't recall whether either of us ever said anything specific about why, but it is something within the industry that is understood.
Can you tell me whether any other actors did not receive roles or were unemployable because of the Me Too movement allegations? Other than Mr. Depp, I'm asking.
Not that I work with directly, no.
In any of your discussions with Mr. Bruckheimer, did you ask him what Mr. Depp could do to become employable by Disney again, or to be able to get any part of any Pirates franchise going forward?
No.
Why not?
Because in cases like this, there is nothing anybody can do. It is the directive of the studio and they have the sole right to make the judgment whether they can continue to employ somebody or not.
And your understanding from your discussions with Mr. Bruckheimer is that Disney had made the judgment to decide that they could no longer employ Mr. Depp. Is that correct?
Yes, but not solely based on conversations with Mr. Bruckheimer. It was cumulative with the internal and external conversations.
What did Mr. Lord say that led you to believe that? That Disney had made the decision, the judgment that they were not able to employ Mr. Depp at Disney?
Just that the decision had been made.
What did Mr. Wiggum say about
The
Disney
same.
making the judgment of whether they would not be able to employ Mr. Depp further?
Same thing.
Okay. Just that they made the decision.
Correct.
Were you aware of any problems on the set with Mr. Depp during the filming of Pirates 5? Were you aware of Mr. Depp engaging in alcohol and drug use, being tardy, any of those issues during the filming of Pirates 5?
I'm aware of him being tardy, but he's been tardy on everything in his entire life.
Were you aware of whether that was troublesome to Disney during the filming of Pirates 5?
I think it's troublesome to everybody, but everyone has learned how to produce a film to deal with it.
Working around Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you know whether there was anyone on the set of Pirates 5 who wasn't willing to deal with it and was quite irritated by it?
No.
Were you aware that the filming had to be shut down for a period of time after Mr. Depp injured his finger?
Yes.
Were you aware of any disagreements between Mr. Depp and Disney, including Mr. Bailey and others who were on the project, about artistic differences? In other words, where Mr. Depp thought something should be this way or something should be that way, and they didn't agree with it?
Yes.
Okay. What is your understanding of that?
There was a difference of opinion on how the film was edited.
And what is your understanding of what Mr. Depp thought it should be edited to?
I don't know how to describe the difference between the Disney edit and Johnny's preferred edit. I think Johnny told me about it, talked about it a little bit.
Do you know how well Pirates 5 did at the box office?
Not exactly.
Do you know whether it was more successful or less successful than earlier Pirates franchise movies?
I think it was slightly less than, I wasn't the most successful installment of that franchise.
Do you know whether Mr. Depp has a pay or play clause that would pay him even if he was not in the subsequent Pirates 6?
In 6?
Yes.
I don't think he does.
Have you or anyone at CAA on behalf of Mr. Depp made any efforts with Disney to find any roles for Mr. Depp since he filmed pirate spy?
My efforts were probably primarily around Houdini, which at one point was a film, but other people at CA for sure did, yes.
Who were they?
I would start with Jack Wigham.
We'll now play volume 2 of Mr. Carino's deposition, at which...
Okay, maybe time for afternoon.
Sure.
Why don't we, it's close enough to it.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
All right, before we get to volume 2, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Please do not talk to anybody about the case and don't do any outside research. Thank you. You want to continue with this witness then?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We'll now play volume 2 of Mr. Carino's deposition, which is the questioning from counsel for Mr. Depp.
Okay, thank you.
You're aware that this litigation involves a dispute between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, correct?
Correct.
And you know both of those individuals, correct?
Correct.
Who did you meet first?
Amber.
When did you meet her?
I don't know exactly when, but probably within the first few years of being at CAA.
Okay. So can we, as an estimate, say 2005, 2006 timeframe?
Sure. I don't actually know, but sure.
But it was pretty early on at your career at CAA.
Correct.
And describe for me the events of your meeting her.
She was represented theatrically at the time by an agent named Warren Zavala, who has since left CAA, and he brought her down to my office because he wanted me to represent her with him, specifically in the commercial space.
And what do you mean represent her in the commercial space?
Help identify business opportunities for her with brands.
Okay. So not as an actor?
Correct.
And did you take on that representation?
I did.
And at some point in time, you did consider her a friend as, in addition to you two working together, is that right?
Yes.
And in that regard, did you and her do anything social?
Yes.
And can you describe for me generally what types of activities you two would do together as friends?
We would go to dinner, go to events together, hang out at each other's residences.
And at some point in time, did you consider Mr. Depp a friend?
Yes.
And how did that relationship evolve? And I'm just talking about you and Mr. Depp becoming friends.
I spent a fair amount of time with both of them together, and at some point started to spend time with him on my own as well.
I see. And at some point in time, did Mr. Depp become as good a friend to you as Ms. Heard? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Let me re-ask that also. Did you consider, at some point in time, did you consider Mr. Depp a friend to the same degree you considered Ms. Heard a friend?
Yes.
And at some point let me ask you, at some point in time, did you represent Mr. Depp professionally?
Yes.
And can you explain to me how it came to you representing Mr. Depp professionally?
Johnny asked me to represent him.
And when you began representing Mr. Depp, did you continue representing Ms. Heard?
Yes.
And do you recall who Mr. Depp's agent was prior to you?
He was represented at another town agency, UTA.
Do you still work for Mr. Depp?
I do not.
Do you recall when you stopped working for Mr. Depp?
Within the past 2 years?
And can you describe the circumstances of you no longer working for Mr. Depp?
He left CAA to follow an agent who left CAA to become part of a founding group in a new management company.
And who is that person?
Jack Wiggum.
Was Mr. Wiggum ever affiliated with CAA?
Yes.
Okay. And say that when Jack Wiggum departed CAA, Johnny went with him?
Yes.
Okay. And when Mr. Depp left CAA, did you remain friends with him?
No.
Okay. Well, I should probably first ask, at some point in time, did your friendship with Mr. Depp end?
Yes.
And when was that?
I would say at the time he left CAA.
And did him leaving CAA have something to do with the end of the friendship?
I don't know.
Are you still friends with Miss Heard?
No.
And when did that friendship end?
Probably when the legal disputes started.
And what legal dispute are you referring to? This one?
I'm not sure which one was first, but one of the disputes between Johnny and Amber.
Okay. But your friendship with, you're not referring to their divorce, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you remain friends with both of them through their divorce. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Although you're no longer friends with Mr. Depp, do you have any animosity towards him?
I do not.
And same question with respect to Miss Heard. Although you're not friends with her any longer, do you have any animosity towards her?
I do not.
Do you recall when it is the last time you spoke with Miss Heard?
I do not.
Would it have been around the same time that your friendship ended with her?
I would assume so.
Exhibit 16.
No, Mr. Carino, you'll see at the bottom here, and tell me if you can see it. If you see at the bottom, it has a bait stamp number under the yellow tag, CC00070.
Yes.
Do you recognize this document? And take your time if you need to review it.
Yes.
Okay. And do you understand this to be a true and authentic copy of email exchange in which you were involved?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay. And you'll see it's dated January 11th, 2018, and the subject is WME. Do you know what is your understanding of what WME is?
William Morris Endeavor.
And what is that?
It's another talent agency.
Okay. And you've read this email from Ms. Hurd to you, correct?
Correct.
So at this point in time, was she a close friend of yours?
Yes.
And ultimately, did she leave CAA?
Yes.
And it was at this time?
Yes.
During the entire time you represented Ms. Hurd, did Mr. Depp ever interfere with your representation of Ms. Hurd?
No.
Did he ever ask you to do anything with respect to her career?
Not that I can recall.
Exhibit 17.
Now, Mr. Carino, this particular document was not produced by you. You'll see that at the bottom here. The date stamp indicates ALH. That means it was produced by Ms. Hurd. And this appears to be a text exchange between you and her. It's about a page and a half. If you could take the time to read it, and then I will ask you questions about it.
I read it.
And you'll see at the top, Mr. Carino, that it's dated July 14th, 2016. Based on that date and based on reading this text exchange, at this point in time, were you close friends with both Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd?
Yes.
And having read the text exchange, do you believe this to be a true and correct representation of the exchange,
Yes.
and to be authentic in that regard?
Yes.
Now, you start the text exchange by indicating JD just surfaced. What is the JD reference?
Johnny Depp.
And she says, I saw Laurel yesterday. Who is Laurel?
Laurel's a therapist.
Do you know her full name?
Laurel Anderson.
Did you independently know Laurel?
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with Laurel seeing either Ms. Hurd or Mr. Depp?
Yes.
And can you explain that to me, please?
I introduced them all.
And what was the purpose of you introducing her to them?
They needed help.
And can you explain to me in more detail what you mean by that?
I think it was at a time where they needed somebody to help mediate the difficulties they were having.
And what do you mean by difficulties?
The strains on their relationship.
And in that regard, did you have conversations with Ms. Hurd about the state of her relationship with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
I'm trying to determine for how long a period of time did Ms. Hurd have conversations with you about the state of her relationship with Mr. Depp? Can you give me a time frame?
I would say she talked to me about the state of their relationship from the beginning until the end.
The entire time you knew her? I'm sorry, the entire time you considered her a friend?
Yes.
And how about Mr. Depp? Did you have conversations with him about the state of his relationship with Ms. Hurd?
Yes.
And were those ongoing during the entire time you were friends with him?
Yes.
You say they both confided in you in that regard?
Yes.
So back to this text exchange. Where my cursor is, Ms. Hurd says to you, yeah, she said that Johnny and I need to talk directly. Do you know who do you know who Ms. Hurd's referring to there?
Laurel.
That was your understanding after reading this?
Yes.
And then you ask her, do you want to do something tomorrow? She says, yeah. She says, IDP, I do. You say, ha, okay. And then you say, what is safe to do? Do you want to come to my place for dinner? What did you mean by what is safe to do?
It meant avoiding paparazzi.
Okay. And then she says, it's so fucked up. I just want to tell him that what they are telling him isn't true. What was your understanding of what she meant by that sentence?
I don't recall.
Mr. Carino, while she's doing that, at the outset of this deposition, I asked you if you recall being deposed about a year ago in this case, and you said yes. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to show you now is the transcript, a portion of the transcript from that deposition. And who is Mr. Bruckheimer?
Jerry Bruckheimer is the producer of the Pirates franchise.
And who is Mr. Wiggum?
Jack Wiggum was an agent at CA who worked with Johnny.
Okay. And who is Mr. Lord?
Brian is one of the managing partners of CAA and also worked on Johnny Depp.
And what was your understanding of why the Pirate 6 job was not offered to Mr. Depp?
Leo, you're asking my opinion?
Yes.
Because of the accusations that Amber had made.
And what I'm about to show you, Mr. Carino, is a article in the Washington Post authored by Ms. Hurd. You're going to notice that the article will be presented sideways. So you'll have to tilt your head a bit to review it.
Exhibit 19.
Do you, first, Mr. Carino, why don't you take control and just scroll through the document? It's just a couple pages.
Is this the top of the next page?
Yeah, when there's a jump like that, it's just at the top of the next page.
Okay.
Mr. Carino, have you seen this document before?
Yes.
Do you know who wrote this document?
Yes.
Who wrote this document?
Amber.
Amber Heard?
Yes.
And do you see there on this first page of the document, it actually indicates that it's written by Amber Heard on December 18th, 2018?
Yes.
And you understand that this document was authored by Ms. Heard and published on December 18th, 2018?
Yes.
And do you recall reading it at the time it was published?
No.
Mr. Carino, I'm showing you an email exchange in which you were involved. It's just this one page. I'll blow it up so you can review it. Take a second to review it, please.
Okay.
And let's start at the bottom of this. Well, you see at the top that the email Ray line is entitled Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow Won't Return in New Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Yes.
And this email exchange was on December 20th, 2018, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall that the article you just read published by Ms. Heard was published on December 18th, 2018, 2 days before this?
Yes.
Now, if you go to the bottom of this email, do you see there's this link to an article?
Yes.
And it says URL defense, it says movieweb.com.
Yes.
Mr. Carino, what I put up next to the email exchange that we've been discussing is an article dated December 20th, 2018. Okay. So this article is dated December 20th, 2018. The email sent to you by Robin Baum is that same day, December 20th, 2018, correct?
Yes.
Who is Ms. Baum?
Johnny's publicist.
Okay. And she's sending this article to you, is that right?
Yes.
And then in response, you say, were we told this officially from Disney? And she responds, Jack Wiggum responds, no. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Sure. So you testified just a few minutes ago that it was your opinion that Mr. Depp lost the Pirates 6 movie because of Ms. Heard's allegations. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Allegations of abuse, correct?
Yes.
And is this a demonstration of when Disney made that decision to not hire Mr. Depp for Pirates 6?
Yes.
Exhibit 22.
Did you ever see Mr. Depp physically abuse Ms. Heard?
No.
Did Ms. Heard ever tell you that she had been physically abused by Mr. Depp?
No.
Did Mr. Depp ever tell you that he had physically abused Ms. Heard?
No.
Did you ever witness any injuries on Ms. Heard that would indicate that she was physically abused?
No.
Now, again, this is a few months after the filing of the divorce papers and the TRO, and Ms. Heard states to you, I'll call you right back, sorry. And you say, okay. She says, is it too late to call? And you say, just finishing dinner, we'll call you as soon as we walk out within 20. And she says, please tell him I love him. Is that an accurate reading of the text exchange so far?
Yes.
Do you know if at this time, based on your relationship with Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp, whether Ms. Heard wanted to reconcile with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
It's your understanding that she did?
Yes.
Did Ms. Heard based on your personal friendship with Ms. Heard, close personal friendship with Ms. Heard, would you say that she confided in you?
Yes.
And what about Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Mr. Carino, at some point in time after Ms. Heard filed those divorce papers in May of 2016, did she make any requests of you to intervene in the relationship between her and Mr. Depp?
What do you mean by intervene?
Assist in, let's start with assist in communications between the two.
Objection. Same objections.
Can you explain to me what transpired in that regard? Walk me through it.
At some point around that time, she wanted me to arrange for them to get together in person.
And what did you do after that was requested of you by Ms. Heard?
I talked to Johnny about it.
What happened after that?
He was reluctant at first and then agreed.
And then what happened after that?
I mean, it's a long time ago, but I remember there was a fair amount of discussion about the TRO and how we would deal with that, because nobody wanted Johnny accused of violating the TRO as an outcome of that meeting. And I don't remember exactly what we did, but Amber at some point warranted that she would never accuse him of violating the TRO to do the meeting, and I set the meeting up.
So just so I understand, you set the meeting up at the request of Ms. Heard?
Objection.
Yeah.
And as part of you setting up, she told you that it didn't matter. I'm trying to understand what was the issue with respect to the TRO?
My understanding of a restraining order, at least at the time, was that he couldn't go within a certain distance of her.
Okay. And what was her suggestion with respect to that issue in connection with her wanting to meet with him?
She promised me and told me to relay to him that she would never accuse him of violating the restraining order as a result of agreeing to meet her. And I believe, but I don't recall exactly, there were conversations with both sides legally, I believe at the time, to make it transparent to everybody that this was happening.
Okay. And then what happened next?
I arranged the meeting. Johnny was in San Francisco on tour, and I arranged to borrow a friend's house, and Amber and I flew to San Francisco and drove to the house, and Johnny showed up a few hours later.
And did the two of them meet
Yes,
in the same room?
they sat outside.
Okay. How close to each other were they?
Inches away from each other.
And how long were they out there talking? For how long were they out there talking?
Several hours.
Did you, although you were out there, were you in a position where you could see them through a window or otherwise?
Yes.
At some point in time, the conversation ended, correct?
Correct.
And what happened after that?
I received a call or a text from Steve, whose house it was, and he notified me that he would be coming back to the house within the next hour or so. And I told Johnny and Amber, and we decided to rent a hotel room in San Francisco so that they could continue to talk.
And did that in fact happen?
Objection.
Yes.
And at some point in time, you left that house, correct, to go to San Francisco?
Yes.
And was it the three of you?
No. Johnny had security with him, and we talked about the fact that it wouldn't be a good idea for them to be seen together. So Johnny left with his security in his car, and I believe Amber and I took an Uber.
And what happened after that?
We all met at the hotel room.
And do you know what happened after that?
They started arguing.
And do you recall any details of the argument?
No.
And for how long was this argument had in a hotel room?
Yes.
Did you witness the entire discussion, or did you leave at some point?
I left the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning.
And Mr. Carino, I'm showing you emails that were produced by you. First, the bottom of the first page, it starts at the bottom of the first page. The string above it was redacted. And you'll see that it starts on August 7th, 2017. Do you see that?
August 7th, 2017, yes.
Having read it, can you determine who you're speaking with in this text exchange?
Amber.
Oh, hang on. Let me ask you this. Do you know whether or not Ms. Heard ever had a relationship with Mr. Elon Musk?
Yes.
She did?
Yes.
So again, it's dated August of 2017. And she says, dealing with breakup, I hate when things go public. See, I'm so sad. Having reviewed the document again, do you have an understanding of what she's referencing there?
I believe she's referring to breaking up with Elon.
You say, seems like a press release. You weren't in love with him, and you told me 1,000 times you were just filling space. What are you saying there?
I'm saying, why would you be sad if you weren't in love with him to begin with?
And by him, you're referring to who?
Elon.
Okay. And at this point in time, were you still close friends with Ms. Heard?
Looks like that's the case at that time, yes.
And did she still, at this point in time, did she confide in you about her relationship?
Yes.
Okay. And you respond, she responds, I know, but I wanted time to grieve and recover in my own time. Is she still referring to Mr. Musk there? Do you know? Your understanding.
I don't know whether she's referring to Johnny or to Elon in that line.
Okay. In this point in time, do you know what her feelings were? What was your understanding? At this point in time, what was your understanding based on your experience with her? What was your understanding of her relationship with Mr. Depp?
I don't believe there was a relationship at that point.
And you say, and you got that. No, she says, I hate that. Yet again, a man lets me fall on the spikes by myself. You ask, how so? She says, oops. Meaning they are mad at me for leaving them and put things like this out there. You say, sorry. she says like that, you say, you could avoid all this if you stop dating uber famous people. You can be with a big man who isn't famous. What were you relating to her there?
I believe what I was saying was, if you don't like being in the press about your personal life, then don't date people that are famous.
Sure. You indicated that she moved on immediately after Johnny Depp to date Elon Musk. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Do you have an understanding one way or another whether Ms. Heard and Mr. Musk were in fact dating at the time of the San Francisco reconciliation that she asked you to set up?
I don't know whether they were dating, but they had definitely spent time together.
Do you know how long after the San Francisco attempted reconciliation you gained the understanding that Elon Musk and Ms. Heard were in fact dating?
I don't know exactly how long, but not long after.
Do you know who or what was your understanding of who she was referring to when she was said, "Here, I love him"?
Johnny.
Based on this exchange, did you have an understanding at this time whether Ms. Heard wanted to reconcile with Mr. Depp?
I believe she did.
And at this point in time, she was still a close personal friend of yours, correct?
Yes.
And at this point in time, did she consider you a confidant in your understanding?
I think, yes.
Okay, just to authenticate this document, again, Mr. Carino, do you see that it's referenced at the bottom, date stamped CC, indicating that you produced this document?
Yes.
And having read this, do you perceive this as a trump card copy of a text exchange between you and Ms. Heard?
Yes.
Okay. And I will, you see at the very top here, it's dated August 16th, 2017.
Yes.
And Ms. Heard states to you, "I've written so many notes. Can you give him one? I don't know how or where to start. There's no way to begin. And all I have to say, but I have so many. Finally, I am single, clear in my heart and mind. I just want him to know I loved him and that I am sorry." Do you have an understanding of who Ms. Heard is referring to here?
Yes.
And who is Ms. Heard referring to in this text?
Johnny.
And what is she asking you to do here?
She was asking me to deliver a letter that she was writing to him.
Oh. And did she also want you to, and it says, "and that I am sorry." What was your understanding of what she was asking you to do there, if anything?
I believe that was all in reference to getting him a handwritten letter that she was writing or trying to write.
Was it your understanding at the time of this text exchange, August 24, 2017, that Ms. Amber was attempting to reconcile with Mr. Depp?
I believe so.
Okay. And I know this may sound repetitive, but on August 20, at the time of this text, on August 24th, 2017, you and her were still close personal friends, correct?
I believe so.
There's not much here at all, Mr. Carino, but I did want to confirm that this was a document produced by you, correct, based on the date stamp on the bottom?
Yes.
And do you see it's dated September 27th, 2017?
September 23rd.
Oh, you're right. My apologies. It's dated September 23rd, 2017. And it's a text to you that says, "God, I miss him." Do you have an understanding of who Ms. Heard is referring to there?
Yes.
And who's that?
Johnny.
And Do you see at the bottom, the date of the text is June 9th, 2018?
Yes.
Okay. And it says, I text him happy birthday. Do you know who sent that and who the him is?
I assume this is from Amber, and she's talking about Johnny.
You've had a chance to review the whole document. Carino, what does this appear to be?
It appears to be the communications around the time that we set up the meeting in San Francisco.
And who are these communications between?
Me and Johnny.
Okay. And this first bubble, can you tell if the blue is you or Mr. Depp?
I think the blue is me.
Sure. Earlier in your deposition, at the very outset, I was asking you about your representation of individuals at CAA. You indicated that you represent individuals that are both actors and musicians. Would you consider Mr. Depp in that pool?
Yes.
And you represented, or CAA represented him both in connection with his acting endeavors and his involvement with the vampires?
Yes.
And was Mr. Depp's participation in Hollywood Vampires lucrative?
No.
Do you know whether or not it was something Mr. Depp enjoyed?
Yes.